Hello YouTube, Shin Tiger Curl here, that dude in the straw hat, bringing you yet another awesome video. As you can see from the screen, I'm going to be using, of course, Salvation. And I'm going to do a little something a bit different. This is not a deck profile or any dueling that I'll be doing on the server network, but rather, this is more of something I've been wanting to do for quite a while. Now, a lot of people, both that I know of and that are subs of mine, probably don't know how to play this game. So I figured I'd just give them a nice little heads up and a how-to video about playing Yu-Gi-Oh! Now, for those of you now that I know there are dozens upon dozens, if not hundreds of videos that show you how to play this game, but I figured I'd offer my own spin on it and give you step-by-step instructions on how to play this game. So, and as for experience, I've been playing this game since 2001, shortly after I got out of high school. I didn't actually get good at it until I started joining local tournaments in Huntsville, Texas, when I was in college. It's how I made a lot of friends, and where I met one of my best friends, Don Dickens. If you're watching this, thank you, bro. But anyway, let's get started. Alright, the basics of Yu-Gi-Oh! Are basically you and your opponent have 8,000 life points, 4,000 depending on what you agree upon. You summon monsters, play spells, and set traps. The object of the game is to reduce your opponent's life points to 0. And there are other ways to win, like with making your opponent not be able to draw their next turn. That's called decking out. You can play a variant called Exodia, where you have all 5 pieces of a monster called Exodia the Forbidden One in your hand. Doing so automatically wins you the game. You can play Final Countdown, which is a spell that after 20 turns after being played, you automatically win the game, and such and such. There are also other variant win conditions that you could do, but typically destroying your opponent's life points is the most common and popular way of winning. So how do you do that? Well, with your cards. So now I'm gonna show you on camera what they are, and Salvation is very, very lenient with that. So here we go. Now, 3 basic types of cards in your deck: monsters, your spells, your traps, and these may sound simple, but there are dozens of different varieties of monsters and spells and traps. So let's go over them individually. First, we go monsters. Monsters are just what they say. You summon monsters to attack your opponent's monsters and weed down their life points. Now, first up, we have normal monsters. These guys are just vanilla, as we like to call them in the game. They're nothing special. They're just monsters with basic attack and defense. Nothing overly special about them. That's why we call them vanilla. They're just plain Jane. Not to say that these guys are useless, but they have seen a lot of play thanks to the changes in the game and the evolution of the game from its origins back in the early 90s. Like I said, this game has been around for a long time. Not as long as Magic, not saying that, but it's been around for a while. So let's get started on what exactly this is. In the middle is the card portrait. I'm using Blue Eyes White Dragon. This is the card portrait. This is just basically a picture of what the monster in question looks like. Now, as you can see, there are many variants of the Blue Eyes White Dragon. A lot of cards from the older sets do have artistic variants. So, if you prefer one style over another, you can play with that. All right, let's back to it. Of course, at the top is the name, Blue Eyes White Dragon. This is the attribute. Attributes determine what particular elemental attribute that monster has. So we have earth, water, fire, wind, no heart, light, dark, and divine. You won't see much of divine here because they're very, very few and very hard to summon. But if you can summon a divine monster, more than likely you'll win the game. But anyway, as you can see here, Blue Eyes is a light attribute monster. These stars are the level of the monster. The higher level that you have, the higher level the monster has, the stronger it is. But it also makes it very hard to summon. I'll get into summoning when we get to the turns. When we get to turn progression, we'll get to that later. Next, this is the this is the ID number right here. A lot of cards can be entered into video game databases by using their ID numbers. Very useful. This down here is the type of monster. This meaning Blue Eyes White Dragon is, of course, a dragon. Now, there are a lot of types that you could go through. We have warrior, spellcaster, fairy, fiend, zombie, sheen, aqua, pyro, rock, winged beast, plant, insect, thunder, dragon, beast, beast warrior, dinosaur, fish, sea serpent, reptile, psychic, divine beast, creator god, and worm. That's a lot of types. So now there are a lot. Now, as you can see, that while there are only 6, maybe 7 are attribute monsters, there are dozens of types of monsters that you can choose. Plus, the combinations make for some interesting gameplay. So you can literally pick whatever you want to play with. I'll get to that later. Down here, we have, normally if it was any other monster, we'd have whatever the effect they had, but since it's just a vanilla monster, this is just vanilla text or flavor text. It just tells you about the card and what it is. And for Blue Eyes, it's the legendary dragon. This legendary dragon is a powerful engine of destruction, virtually invincible. Very few will face this awesome creature and live to tell the tale. Now, that's just pretty much it. It doesn't really give the card any kind of special abilities or bonuses. It's just normal. Here's the statistics of the card. If you can't see, here it is down here. 3,000. This is the attack value. This means how strong it is when it's going in for an attack, meaning that Blue Eyes is 3,000 attack. This is the defense. If you're defending against your opponent's superior attack, this will prevent you. You can set this in defense mode to block their attacks. This is how strong they are defending. So it has 2,500 attack. So its attack is greater than its defense. And that's pretty much all you need to know about normal monsters. We're moving on to effects. And as you see before, this one, unlike the vanilla monsters, effects are nearly 3,000 of them. And there are a ton of these bastards. So, and it just now, similar to before, I'm going to just use Malefic Truth Dragon as a example. As before, of course, you have the type. This is a dark type. Its level, which is 4, 8. This is a 12-star monster, meaning it's very, very powerful. Down here, of course, is the type of monster, which is a dragon. Down here, this is the special effect. All effect monsters have effects, which, depending on the type of monster it is, certain types of monsters can grant you effects that allow it to be special summoned much easier. Special summoning is something we'll get into later, meaning that this guy may be pretty big and beastly, but his effect is it can't be special summoned except by its own effect. If a face-up Malefic monster, except Malefic Truth Dragon, is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can pay half your life points to special summon this card from your hand or graveyard. So this card is very useful in Malefic decks. Get to that later. All effect monsters have different effects, either when gaining control of the field through blowing up your opponent's monsters or traps, special summoning, or its various types. Nowadays, you best not run. You best run into. Nowadays, you will run into decks that just run solely these cards, which is just pretty much the norm. Very few people nowadays actually run with vanilla cards, unless it's in some type of new variant. I'll get to those in a little bit. So yeah, moving on. Next up we have fusions. Now, fusions are the cards that are a different sort. They come from your extra deck. You actually have 2 decks if you want. One is your main deck, which has all your magic spells and traps, and then you have your extra deck, which contains all of these cards. Don't go into the count for your main deck. They just are in your side deck, extra deck. Now, fusions are similar to all to your other deck monsters. This is the name, the type, the type or attribute. I'm sorry, the level. Of course, then we go the attribute, which is a dragon, the type of monster, fusion, and also is an effect monster as well. Now, to summon a fusion monster is just like it sounds. You fuse two monsters together to create a brand new monster. But for the majority of them, you need specific cards to fuse together in order to bring this one out. For like this one, I'm using Dragon Master Knight as an example. For this one, but just below it, you see here, this text means, this shows you what is required to fusion summon this bad boy. So you need the monsters Blackluster Soldier and Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon. So, and just below that is the effect. This monster can't be special summoned except by fusion summon. This card gains 500 attack for every other dragon type monster you control, and it has 5,000 attack and defense. So yeah. And then you need a card called Polymerization, or Fusion in Japanese. Basically, it's a spell card that lets you fuse from the hand or the field to bring this out. Now, there are other ways to fuse these cards. Some decks, archetypes have fusion-specific cards that allow you to fusion summon with ease. Like, Shadows have their own fusion card, and Gem Knights, and Furnimals have their own fusion cards. And sometimes you can even fuse without needing a fusion card. This is called contact fusion. And only two decks I know of that can have this are E-Hero and E-Hero / Neospatians and Gladiator Beasts. And Cyber Dragon has a fusion that requires contact fusion as well. It's a few far in between, but it's a nice little technique to use. So, those are fusions. Next up, we have rituals. I'm using Herald of Ultimateness as an effect, as an example. Now, rituals are just like they sound. They are monsters that can be summoned through a specific ritual. Now, of course, before you have Herald of Ultimateness, the name. Here's its attribute, the level. Then under it, we have its type, what kind of card it is, which is a ritual, and if it has any effects or not, which this one does. Often ritual monster cards have this title in front of it. You can ritual summon this card with Oracle of the Herald, and must be ritual summoned. Now, Oracle of the Herald is a special ritual spell card. You cannot summon this guy unless you have the appropriate ritual spell card in your hand. So if this card is just in your hand, you ain't summon it no way unless you have the ritual in your hand. And even if you do, you have to have appropriate monsters to sacrifice equal to its level. So this was a level 12, so you need a lot of monsters, or one monster, to send to the graveyard as an offering, and then you can special summon this bad boy from your hand. It has to be from your hand. And unlike fusions, this is in your extra deck. This is not in your extra deck, this is in your main deck. So, and there are quite a number. There are only 53 ritual cards, but these bastards are powerful. Trust me, I've faced them a lot. In the right deck, they're evil. So, let's move on. Now we're up to synchro monsters. Now, for the longest time in the game, rituals, fusions, and effects were the only monsters that you could mess around with in your deck. Then came Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, which introduced an entirely new monster with an entirely new summoning mechanic, synchro summons. Synchro monsters, like your fusions, come from your extra deck, so you don't have to worry about putting them in your main deck and drawing them. Now, like before, I'm using Stardust Silver Spark Dragon as an example. Of course, attribute light, 12 star, which is a level 12 monster. It's a dragon type monster. It's a synchro monster, and it's an effect monster. Now, how do you summon it? Now, there are special monster cards that are also effect monsters called tuners. Tuners can kind of combine with other monsters of different levels to create an entirely new monster. Now, if you want to summon a specific synchro monster, what you do is if you have a tuner monster on the field, and you have to have a non-tuner monster. It could be anything, as long as the levels are the appropriate level. Like if you want to summon a, I don't know, like if you want to summon, so let's get something easy, like Star Eater, which is a level, I think that's a level 12 or a level 11, I can't really see from here, but if you want to summon Star Eater, first the requirements are 1 tuner plus 1 or more non-tuner monsters. So you can have a level 4 tuner, and then you have to have 1 monster that is either level 7 or 2 monsters where one is a level 4 and a level 3, or one that's a level 2 and one that's a level 5. All the levels have to equal the level that you're trying to summon. So it all has to equal level 12. Doesn't matter what monsters you use with it. Some synchros require specific tuners or specific monster types in order to summon them. These are particularly powerful, and they can be easily summoned again when the situation calls for it. Now there are over 230 different synchro monsters, and these bad boys are pretty much easy to summon. I like these guys. These are my favorite monsters, and I try to summon them all the time. Alright, moving on. Now we have Exceeds. I know it says XYZ, and a lot of people, specifically Asian eyes, like to say XYZ monsters, but no, this is an Exceeds. Now, going on, Exceed monsters were introduced in the generation for Zexal. These cards, and I'm going to use number 81, Super Dreadnought Rail Cannon Super Dora, as an example. Now, like synchros and fusions, these go into your extra deck, and you get them from your extra deck. Now here of course is the name, the attribute, but this is not the level. I know it says C's here, but this is not a level. You see, unlike the other cards, the monsters as I mentioned, Exceed monsters have ranks. They don't have levels. So this is a rank 10 monster right here. Now, what does ranks mean? So first we go to machines. This is its machine. This is the type. It's an Exceed monster, and it's also an effect monster. Now, down here it says 2 level 10 monsters. What this means is you have to have 2 monsters when you Exceed summon. You have to have 2 monsters of the same level. This is not like synchro summoning. This is 2 monsters of the exact same level. For case for this guy, it's 2 level 10s. It has to be level 10s. To summon it, you merely have to place the 2 monsters on top of each other and then bring out the appropriate monster. Doing this is called overlaying. Hold on, Mom, recording. This is called overlaying. Now, when you Exceed summon from your extra deck, the 2 monsters that you use to Exceed summon the card become overlay units. And you can detach or Exceed material if you want. I prefer overlay units. But anyway, the overlay units can be used to activate the monster's specific effects. For this one, you can detach 1 Exceed material from this card and then target a face-up monster on the field. This turn, it is unaffected by card effects except its own. Now, you can keep doing this. There is no limit to how many times you can keep doing this during the duel. But once you run out of Exceed material, once they're in the graveyard, this becomes dead. It just becomes an attacker or a defender or what have you. Now, certain monsters also have the ability to rank up you can actually rank up using appropriate magic cards to higher rank cards from your extra deck, or some cards can actually rank up themselves given the specific situation. So I don't really bother with these cards unless the deck calls for them, but they can be pretty useful. But just remember that once they lose their Exceed material, unless you have some way of reattaching them, they're going to be just on the field, and once they're gone, they're gone. So just watch out for it. Now, let's move on. Now, here we are with tuners. Yes. Like I said before, these are just tuners, and you can tell that they're tuners by the fact that they have the tuner title right here, right next to their type. You can tell just what they are by that type. So, anyway, like I said before, if you want to synchro summon, you have to have a tuner and the number of non-tuner monsters, and all their levels have to equal the level of the monster you're trying to summon. Like, look at Gen X Controller. He is a level 3 tuner monster. So if you wanted to summon a level 5 synchro monster, then you have to have this guy plus a level 2 monster or 2 level 1s. You have to make up the difference. And then you send them to the graveyard and summon the monster from your extra deck to the field. So yeah, if you're running synchro decks, you want to run one of these guys. So moving on, we have Gemini monsters. These are a special class of monsters unto themselves. They're the same as effect monsters, but here's the deal. Gemini monsters, when they're on the field or in the graveyard, are counted as normal monsters. Yes, I know what it said. I know that it's the orange field means that it's an effect monster, but while it's in the graveyard or on the field, they count as normal monsters or vanillas. This might sound bad, but they're actually spells and traps that can make use of normal monsters. Now, in order to get down here, when this card is on the field, you can normal summon it again to be treated as an effect monster. What this means is, if the card is on the field for after you've summoned it, or if it stays on the field for like another turn, then instead of your regular summon, you can normal summon this again. Just say, I'm normal summoning this again, and it gains an appropriate effect. Gemini monsters have a good deal of versatility with them. So take advantage of the fact that these cards can be counted as normal monsters, and there's a lot of support for normal monsters. So keep that in mind. Next up, Union monsters. This is the deck archetype that was been around since the earlier days of Yu-Gi-Oh! I remember when these guys first came out, and I thought they had potential, but as you can see, there are only 26 of them. But just like effect monsters, the standard attribute, level, type, but union. Union means that when you have an appropriate monster on the field, you can actually equip these to a monster to give them extra effects, like giving them additional attack or preventing them from being destroyed. They act just like equip spells. I'll get to those later. So I rarely see these nowadays, but I love it when I see them around. Next we have spirit monsters. They've been around since the early days of the game too. They're pretty much the standard. This one, Hino Kagasuchi. They're the standard attribute, level, and type. But spirits have a different sort of ability. Because of the way they are, they can't be special summoned. Well, this card can be special summoned. The difference is, these cards return to the owner's hand on the turn that they are flipped face up or normal summoned. So, and they're tricky to work with, even when I was playing with them back in the day. But they do have a strong archetype with them. They do have strong support, and they're kind of hard to deal with since they just come back to your hand, so you don't have to worry about losing them in the graveyard. But there are ways around that. Next, we have flip effects. Flip mod. The same as before: levels, attribute, type, and flip. What this means is that when you play a monster face down in defense mode, and if they're still around, then you flip them face up. That's called a flip summon. I'll get to that later. This is when when this text says flip, that means if this monster is flipped face up, either by you flip summoning it, or being flipped over because of card effect, or being flipped over because your opponent attacked into it, an effect pops off. This is a very fast effect. As there are 142 of these bastards, so they're pretty useful and good. And there is even an entire deck archetype reliant on flip summoning and flipping effects. So give these guys a good look-see. Next we have tunes. Now, if you've ever watched the Yu-Gi-Oh! Animated series, you know all about these guys. These are merely just tunified versions of other cards. All of these cards in the tune variant have a standard variant in the game. These are just tunified. What this means is that these guys can, when they're on the field, if you have a specific spell card like Toon World or Toon Kingdom, You can special summon them easily, but the downside is they can't attack the turn they are special summoned, since they're all counted as a special summon. Now the plus side is these guys can attack your opponent directly. They can hop over your opponent's monsters and just attack your opponent's life points directly. And since a lot of them have high attack and defense, they are nasty to deal with. But if you take out their fields, the spell that they need to exist on the field, they can die. There's only 12 of these cards. Shame. And now, the recently added Pendulum Monsters. Now, these cards can be normal or effect variants, but they oftentimes have two effects. This is, of course, you see, this is the name, attribute, level, and of course they have. Now up here is where they have a pendulum effect. Now, recently added to the game, on either side of the board are what we call pendulum zones. These are specifically for pendulum monsters. These numbers right here are called the pendulum scale. So, and these are specifically used for pendulum summons. Now, what's pendulum summoning? I'm going to break a little something here just so you can understand what these cards do. First, when you play, you can play these pendulum monsters on either pendulum zone. There's no specific side that favors one or the other. Now, when you set them, they are counted as spell cards. Yes, I know that's really weird, but work with me on this one. Now, the pendulum scale of this Laphosaurus, or Laphos, I can't pronounce this name, is a 7. Now let's move down to a lower pendulum scale monster. Probably the lowest we'll go, and we'll go to Ignite Magnum, not Magnum. Let's see. Let's go to Rizbel the Summoner. This one has a pendulum scale of 2. If you have a 2, if you have that last monster, which is a 7, and this one, which is a 2, set on the field, then you can perform what is called a pendulum summon. What this means is you can special summon monsters from your hand or extra deck. I'll get to that in a little bit. That fall between that scale on their level. So since I've set Rizbel to 2. Now let's make an example. All right. Say I set Rizbel, which is a 2, and Daibaka, which is a 7. So what this means is I can pendulum summon monsters from my hand or extra deck that fall between the scale. So 2 and 7. So I can summon level 3 to level 6 monsters from my hand without sacrificing or special summoning. This is called a pendulum summon. Now, another thing that all the most pendulum monsters have is a pendulum effect, meaning that they get a special effect when set into the pendulum zone. For Rizbel, it's once per turn you can target my face-up monster on the field, increase its level by 1. This remains even if this card leaves the field. Below that, they all, of course, have effects, but since this is a pendulum normal monster, it just has flavor text. Daibaka is a pendulum effect monster, meaning that it has a pendulum effect and a monster effect when it's on the field normally as a regular old monster. So keep that in mind. I'm just gonna clear that. But yeah, but another thing you need to know is when pendulum monsters are destroyed, they don't go to the graveyard. They go face up in your extra deck. And if their level falls between a pendulum scale you set later on, you can pendulum summon them out of your extra deck. So this gives them quite a bit of versatility in both synchro decks and exceeds decks. So those are all the monsters that you can possibly have. Alright, moving on. We have spell cards. Spells are just what they say. They're magic spells that you can cast to do various effects. And like the before, they have different different variants of the spells. So let's go through them right quickly. Here we have normal spells. These cards are one-time use only cards. You play them and you can activate a certain effect. These are probably the most popular spell cards in the game, or magic cards in the game. Speed Rebirth means that you can target one Speedroid monster in your grave, special summon it. And this one also has an effect that you can actually banish it from your graveyard and target a Speedroid monster in your grave to add it to your hand. A lot of cards have that extra effect of banishing themselves from the graveyard. But once these cards are used, they're sent to the graveyard. That's it. They're done. But certain cards have special conditions in which you have to meet in order to play them. Like Hero Flash, you have to banish 4 other specific magic cards before you can play this card. So, there's that. Next up, we have quick play spell cards. You can tell that these are quick plays because of this little lightning bolt symbol right here. This means that you can play them at a moment's notice. You can play them from your hand quickly during phases when you can't play normal spells, because normal spells can only be played during your main phase. That's it. These cards can be played either during your main phase or your battle phase or your end phase. As long as they're set on the field, you can just flip them over quickly. This is a good way of reacting to your opponent at a moment's notice. There's fast cards for fast dueling. Next, we have continuous spell cards. Now, these are cards that stay on the field. Once you play them, they stay on the field unless they're removed by its own effect or by your opponent's effect. Let's look at A-Forces. And you can tell these are continuous effects by the little infinity symbol right here. This means that they stay on the field. They only leave the field if your opponent destroys them or if they're removed from the field by its own effect. Now, A-Forces, all warrior monsters you control, gain 200 attack for each face-up warrior or spellcaster on the field. Sorry, got something stuck in my throat. So, these stay on the field, but they also take up space on your spell and trap card zone, so be careful when playing these. Alright. Next up, a card I already mentioned, ritual cards. Remember those ritual monsters I told you about that you need a specific card to summon? These are they. Now, each ritual card has a little flame symbol, meaning that you're offering tributes to summon the ritual monsters. And they often have this text here that's saying that it can only be used to ritual summon the specific ritual monster, in this case Paladin of White Dragon. So you have to have this card, the specific ritual monster, and you can also tribute, and so you have to tribute monsters whose level equals that monster or more from your hand. So since Paladin of White Dragon is a level 4 ritual monster, you need monsters that equal that level. So you can ditch a level 4 or 2 level 1s, or 2 level 2s, or a level 3 and a level 1, or 4 level 1s to summon it from your hand. So yeah, like normal spells, they're one-time use only. Once they're gone, unless you're using a specific variant that allows you to get them back to your hand. Now next up we have equip spells. You can tell the equip spells by the little cross shape they have right here. Equip spells are just like they sound. They are spells that equip on to monsters. You can equip to some equip spells can only be equipped to specific monsters, but generally they can be equipped to any monster on the field, even your opponents. They give buffs like specifically Bautista of Rampart Smashing, and if the equipped monster attacks a face-down defense position monster, it gains 500 attack during damage calculation only. And this one, the amplifier only works with the monster Jinzo. So, you rarely see equipped spells nowadays, but when they get played, they can be devastating in the right deck. And finally, we have field spells. Now, field spells have their own specific area on the field to be played in, just above your extra deck. Field spells are just like they sound. They are spells, and you can tell them by the little symbol here that looks kind of like a cross, but with like a spikier design to it. Field spells are played. When they play, they change the field overall. like a legendary ocean turns it into like an ocean area. Now, before the changes came down for the Arc 5 generation, you could now if your opponent has a field spell and you play one over it, that field spell is destroyed, or if your opponent, or vice versa. Now both players can play 2 field spells at once, meaning you could play a field spell and your opponent could play a field spell. Now, field spells often give you advantages for your particular deck, like a legendary ocean. All water monsters in both players' hands and on the field have their levels reduced by 1, and they gain 200 attack and defense. But other times it can act as debuffs, like Sargasso, or a different dimension, Ancient Battlefield Sargasso. If a player succeeds summons, they take 500 points of damage. And during each end phase, if the turn the player controls an Exceed monster, that player loses 500 points of life. Now, so they can help you and hurt your opponent. So you can, some decks have there are certain deck archetypes that have deck specific field spells, like Cosmo Town works with Cosmo monsters. So if you want to run a specific archetype, take a look at the field spells, because they grant you some pretty neat bonuses. And that's it for the magic cards or spell cards. Now let's move on to trap cards. These are just like they sound. These are cards that you set on the field, and when your opponent attacks or does a specific action, you can activate these to really fuck up their day. Now, of course, like before, we have different types. For this one, there's only 3. These are normal trap cards. They're red and they're tinted, and they just say trap. Now, trap cards can be activated. You have to wait at least until the start of your opponent's turn to activate trap cards. Now, some can get over this by being able to activate trap cards from your hand, or when certain conditions have been met on the field. But once your opponent's turn begins, you can activate them as long as you satisfy the activation condition. Like, look at Red Cocoon, nice little trap card, but you can only activate it when you have a dragon synchro monster that you control, and you can equip this card to that target, so it acts like an equip spell. Some of them act like that anyway. Now we have continuous trap cards. Just like continuous spells, continuous traps, once they're activated, they stayed on the field until they're removed. Now, there's another variety here that I didn't really get into, but I'm going to try to find it if I can. Let's see, where is it? Now, once they activate, they just stay on the field, excuse me. And their effects can be used whenever. Alright. Here we are. This card right here is a sub-archetype of a sub-archetype. This is called a trap monster. First introduced in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, well, the first Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, but didn't see a major release until much, much later. Trap monsters are trap cards that, once activated, they leave a spell on trap zone and go to the monster zone, and they are counted as monster cards. These are quite unique, and after like here, Embodiment of Apophis, during either player's main phase, special summon this card as a normal monster, and then it gives the stats here. It's a reptile Earth monster, that's level 4, 1600 attack, 1800 defense. But it's also still considered a trap card. So your opponent can blow it up with cards that destroy spells or traps, or run it over with monster cards, essentially. These can be used easily for Exceed summons and Synchro summons and the like, or Tribute for ritual summons, or Tribute for tribute summon monsters and the like. There are not that many trap monsters in the decks right now, but there's a deck type that can use trap monsters. If you want to check out what a trap monster deck looks like, look up Baykite88's channel. He has several duels where he uses trap monster deck. He uses trap monster decks. Trust me, they're a nice little nasty little deck to fuck your opponents over with. But yeah, those are continuous. Now we have counter traps. You can tell these are counter traps by the little arrow right here. Counter traps are basically counter moves that react to your opponent's actions. Like, let's see, let's go here, exceed reflect. Now, you can't activate this willy-nilly. You have to fulfill the trap condition. Now, these are quite fast. They are faster than, they can be counted as faster than quick plays and regular traps, since they react to your opponent. So, like this one, exceed reflect. When a spell, trap, or effect monster's effect is activated that targets a face-up exceeds monsters on the field, you can activate this bad boy, negate that activation, destroy it, and then inflict 800 points of damage to your opponent. So these are just here to react to what your opponent is going to do. If they summon a monster, you can you can counter it by playing one of these, or activating an effect, or such and such. These are good counters for what you do. But yeah, that are the basic monsters for the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! So these are basically the cards that you would have in your deck. Now, as for how many should go into it, I'll get to that another time. Next time, we'll be looking at the turn order of Yu-Gi-Oh! And how the exact progression of turns go as far as the game goes. So, if you've liked what you've seen, link, comment, subscribe below. Got any questions, any comments, or you just want to talk about anything that I've missed, or if this video has been any bit helpful in you understanding the game of Yu-Gi-Oh! And makes you want to get into it, just leave below. I will get back to you. You want to support the channel? Just click on an advertisement or two. It really helps out. Or click that like button. Or if you want to just support the channel directly, tip jars up there. You know what to do. So until next time, it's been Shin Tiger Curl, that dude with the straw hat, saying it's time to get your game on.